Yes, hello. My name is Alinaitwa Carlton, an undergraduate biotechnology student from Uganda, and together with Safa Abdulrahim Abdallah from Sudan, we're on the topic, should mandatory genetic-based vaccination policies be implemented for public health? And we're on the negative team, or the negator side. So, before we go any further, I know you're asking yourself, what are genetic-based vaccines that are implemented in this genetic-based vaccination? Well, genetic-based vaccines are vaccines that use genetic data, or in simple terms, messenger RNA, DNA, or viral vector technology, that is also genetic information from viruses, to instruct cells to produce antigens that will come and act against the pathogen that is in the system, that has infested the system. And making them mandatory, something mandatory is something required by law, and it has penalties if there is no compliance. Penalties such as loss of jobs, fines, restrictions on movement, name it. And there is something. The affirmative side is going to bring the advantages, and we shall be bringing out the various risks, the various technical issues that we have to look at, the various risks, the risks that are majorly revolving around bodily autonomy and privacy and regulation, and how the public will perceive it, how the public is going to be running about, and why it should not be mandatory, if or why it shouldn't be involved in public health and only consent driven. Only one that is well aware of what happens or well sensitized is the one that should go for it, not a mandate thing. And just like we see, it is, should mandatory genetic-based vaccines be made mandatory? I mean, should genetic-based vaccines should be made mandatory in public health? Public health is simply taking initiatives that are combating general health problems. Health problems are affecting the public, just like you see vaccination and the killer infant diseases such as polio, measles, that is very, very much implemented in Africa and has registered success. So, just like you see, mandating genetic-based vaccines violates fundamental human rights and poses unacceptable scientific risks. It also threatens data privacy. I mean, this genome is mine. This data, this genetic data is mine. It is an individual's. It belongs to the individual. So they have a right over it. They have a right over how much you're going to interact with their genome and how much you might benefit from it without their consent. Yes, as the first contention says in our constructive argument, there is a risk on bodily autonomy and medical ethics. The violation of this informed consent, which is the very, very core of what bioethics, the medical ethics revolve around in the day, like currently, is an issue that we should look at. Back in the day, as late as 1947, which is not very many years back, the Nuremberg Code that is also looking at how consent should be involved in public health or in administering health initiatives to combat some challenges that are health related, was implemented, and it very much discourages violation of informed consent, as this mandatory genetic-based vaccination would come without involving the consent of the person that's going to receive the vaccination. UNESCO Declaration on Bioethics and Human Rights, just like we said, bioethics currently revolves around informed consent, the person's bodily autonomy. Bodily autonomy means one's right and control over their body and decisions over the health, decisions over their health life. Yes, and with integrity, it is not as essential because one has the right over their what? Over their genomic data, and forcing it is a state of jurisdiction. It doesn't have any remember, this genetic data is our identity. We cannot just give it away. Just like someone coming and how can I give this? But We shouldn't. We should have. We should have consent, and we should have 100% power in making decisions with how we're running our lives. That is all about the bodily autonomy. Yes, I think what we can I think what we can have as a take home is if we mandate genetic vaccines, what prevents these governments, like governments in highly developed countries, from mandating other genetic modifications, like maybe having out genetic research and genetic modifications on germ cells, or research and genetic modifications on other types of fields that are currently not ethical, that are currently not viewed as ethical. And that is why we resort to the conventional way of viewing things. The contention too is data privacy and genetic discrimination. Just like I've told you, this data, one has the privacy over their genetic information. And leave alone that, if this is implemented, this will cause, you know how this mandating of these public health initiatives usually happens. If you're not vaccinated for this, you're not getting to this place. You're not having a passport. You're not getting to this. You're not allowed to gather with your friends. You're not allowed to mix and tangle up. And this causes discrimination. Only this can expose one's genetic data, such as those that are with genetic, what should we call them? They don't have, they're not as blessed with their genome as some others might be, which can also cause exposure, because you might find that this general template of genetic vaccination might not work for them due to lack of some genes, due to mutations that is hereditary, and this might cause their discrimination. They might be discriminated. They might be not treated fair by the other people. You see, this impossibility of anonymity, the genetic data is ultimate identifier, just like we had said. It cannot be de-anonymized like a credit card number. It is not rigid. It is not. It is not a template for everyone, and that is why we should not take this as a general template, making it a public health thing. It involves intensive study that should be first taken on one's genome before we implement and administer these genetic vaccines, because you know these sequences, they should be complementary at a certain point to have these antigens to be produced. You know how this genetic data interpretation and translation transcription works. There's a lot of study that should be done to ensure accuracy. And talking about the genetic privacy, the privacy is difficult to ensure because it is complex to safeguard other types of data. As just as Dr. Hausman and all others that were in that kind of study and reasoning tried to give us in the different publications in 2018. Like, just like I had told you, it exposes other sorts of insecurities someone might have with their genome that can bring about discrimination. Yes, I think we're going on very well. Just like we had said, the risk of discrimination, it ensures that if we do not go by this, you're going to find that if we make it mandate and genetic data is exposed, you're going to find that companies like insurance companies, employers in industries and companies, they're going to bring out several discrimination policies basing on one's genetic data, leave alone this mandatory implementation and vaccination. You're going to find that some people with specific genetic scenarios are not are allowed to be accessing some other services. And these are things that the Prince Act of Minnesota, you know, Prince was after some professor that had died and was literally advocating for this equality and genetic privacy. So they named it after them around 2016 there in Minnesota. And the GINA Act, I think the GINA Act is quite, the GINA Act is quite um, famous, it's quite known. The GINA, GINA in full. What is GINA in full? What do you guys think? The GINA Act. What is GINA in full? So the GINA Act was also implemented in USA to curb these discrimination motives that might arise due to this. The GINA Act is the Genetic Information and Discrimination Act, like GINA, Genetic Information and Discrimination Act. And it was implemented in the USA to ensure equitable sharing of all opportunities that are around, irrespective of the genetic situations that someone might be under. Yes, the hiring based on genetic susceptibility, the promotions, making promotions based on genetic positions. There's that kind of thing that insurance companies might decide to do due to the differences in genomic data, raising premiums, giving other services to specific people and raising money that they might need to leverage from them. That was all curbed and tried to be silenced by these two sorts of relevant examples that I've given. Yes, a mandatory genetic policy requires a database, mind you, and this creates a target for hackers. If we have a database, we're not 100% sure that it is going to be protected. The data is easily accessible by any who might hack into the system. And this poses threats to the people whose data is on the databases. So the 23andMe is a company that was having genetic data in the USA. But that genetic information is very high, just like I'd said for the cyber criminals. They can use that info in any way they might please. And that is not something that we might require to happen, right? And that is also another disadvantage that might arise due to that. Yes. So the third contention is safety and precautionary principle. Long-term data gaps. These genetic-based vaccines, the mRNA vaccines, the DNA vaccines, they're relatively new in mass deployment. They've not been around, and people rarely trust things that have just come on market. And this can interrupt the way we are implementing them if we have decided to go with a public health motive. We don't know how they interact. There are autoimmune responses that might arise. People are very, very, very well cautious about what they take in. There are very many numerous effects that can come around, and we might not require them to. So, in different threats of local and systemic reactions were encountered with, like, yes, the very, very good example is these COVID-19 vaccines. Most of them were later on hauled off because they weren't tested enough. And this poses threats to public health. They were hauled off because of the high rates of adverse effects. The WU papers kind of show that. We've listed all this in the references, how to get that, and I think you get to get more information about it. But here we're looking at how long have they spent on it. If you look at the trust a parent can give to the polio vaccines, the measles vaccines, because they took a long time while trying to process them, or any other types of vaccines like these attenuated pathogen vaccines. Like they took a lot of time, a long process, and they were tested and approved. So people take their kids and take them for immunization with a firm heart, with all faith that everything is going to work and no side effects might arise. But if you look at the way these vaccines evolved quickly, I mean, emerged quickly on market and were implemented there and then, that is not a very good public health move. And just like we had told you, genomics is different. Every person has a different set of genome, and it might work differently due to this complementarity of genes and the complementarity we need in base pairing for the magic to be done there. And still without that contention, the risk versus the benefit. For young and healthy population, risk of new genetic technology might outweigh the risk of disease. Safety profile, just like you can see here, the COVID-19 vaccine is still incomplete, just like I told you, especially in some populations like children, adolescents, pregnant women, still with the WU papers. You can see that they are not trusted. There is no trust yet, and public usually works with trust. They have an unacceptable short-term safety. However, long-term effects are still unknown. There wasn't intensive research. And okay, we might not use this as a center. Maybe if there's been more and more research with these genetic vaccines, but currently, and to put them on market, we should have done some intensive research, close to 5 years, testing with various people. How about these people with maybe the Parkinson's, people with albinisms? You might find that various conditions might arise, various conditions that might arise due to various biochemistry that is all regulated and controlled by genes, the genome. Yes, and public trust, the core of public health. Coercion breeds resistance. We all know that. If we forcibly enforce something, if we forcibly advocate for something without looking for people's view, of course there might arise some resistance. Medical mandates divide society into clean and unclean. This is very, very self-explanatory. So you might find that those people that were back in the day, those that were vaccinated against the COVID-19, of course, they might have been viewed as clean, and those that weren't were clearly viewed as unclean. Better alternatives such as education, accessibility, and voluntary incentives preserve the trust. You see that sensitization is all the public needs, and all those trials in sensitizations, they need you to give them the trust. We said the trust loops, and that is what other public health motive sorts of implementations have been utilizing. But it is still not yet that easy to just come and implement these genetic based vaccines, because with all these the genome with all these AI intimidations on how genomes and genetic cloning, genetic modified organisms risks in Africa, like the government does not understand things clearly because there is lack of skilled personnel there, or the public has myths about this genetically modified stuff. Everything genetically modified is not trusted by the not trusted by the public, because they might think these scientists are now trying to play God or something like that. And that is why we might register very little or no success with mandating these genetic based vaccines. You might even find uproars, rebellions and stuff like that. So the affirmative says, so the affirmative says public health, sorry about that delay while speaking. The affirmative says public health equity and awareness with these genetic based vaccines mandates and promotes equal access to advanced vaccine technologies. Yes, this is true, but accessibility should be there. But the decision on accessing and utilizing the provided opportunity is all about the person that is going to be taking this on. Just like we started with bodily autonomy, the decisions should be made by someone. Health decisions should be made by someone. The affirmative also says that there is rapid response and preparedness point. Just like you saw how they rapidly emerged, just like how you saw that they rapidly came out, and the disaster preparedness with these genetic based vaccines, since they think they are very rapid and precise to the point, but there might not be a rigid template as these attenuated pathogen vaccines or any other sorts of traditional vaccines that have been around. So you get to find that this point of disaster preparedness and rapid response might not be an issue, but the preparedness, the rapid vaccine design within weeks of identifying a pathogen, it might need intensive work. You know, this bioinformatics work that they do, does not just take weeks, or it should be validated. It should be carried out and verified over some good time. Pardon my microphone. I don't know what is happening with it, but I hope you can still get me. Can you? Yes, it needs intensive research to get the public's trust. Yes, develop vaccine within a short time frame wouldn't gain trust from the public, just like we are saying here. They would presume it needed more testing and distinct genetic differences. As you know, the genomes are not that similar or uniform. Everybody has their own genome and the different particulars it has. Yes, so mandates violate fundamental human rights and bioethics. We have seen that, and genetic data privacy is impossible to guarantee with these genetic-based vaccines. So long-term safety is also unproven. It can work, but with time, maybe, or it can work. The long-term safety is not that proven because people might use this genetic information for either uncalled for activities and projects, which is not very much called for and wanted by the public. And just like we have said, the coercion destroys all the public trust there could be. You shouldn't trade your genetic information or privacy for the illusion of security. And that is all I have for you. My name is Alinaitu John Carlton. I've worked with my counterpart. You can see her very clearly in the slides, and I think we've all obtained something from this. Thank you for listening to me. Currently, I'm open to any questions that might arise.